Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot.
And as I am each month, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Craig Joseph. He's the Chief Medical Officer at Nordic Consulting Partners, and we're doing our monthly News You Can Use episode. Craig, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I've got to be honest, when we started talking about COVID as part of this monthly update, I'm going to say I did not expect at the end of 2021 to be talking about it, but here we are. We're working our way through the Greek alphabet, and Omicron is the trending topic. Certainly big focus of attention, deserved or not.
Oh, I think very much deserved. I will agree with your premise that we shouldn't be talking about this at this point. In fact, I thought in the middle of the summer, I thought that we would be getting away from this by now. But the variants have gotten us, and Omicron is different enough that it's a whole different conversation now. And I think it's astounding what this version of the virus is doing. It's unbelievable. It's doubling in 1 to 3 days in big cities. And
in technical terms, we say it's running through as like a dose of salt.
Is that what we say? A dose
Yes.
of salt? Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, let's go with that. So it's going fast, and it seems to be, right? It seems to be that it's a less dangerous form of the virus, although I think the jury is certainly out still. We need more evidence to push us one way or the other. But what clearly we don't need any more evidence is that it's incredibly contagious. And there are people who I respect, who I listen to, who are saying like, hey, it's really just a matter of time till we all get this. It's you can run, but you may not be able to hide from this one. And so kind of taking that into consideration, it's really fairly devastating, even if it's not as dangerous in that it doesn't cause as many people to become very sick and hospitalized and need intensive care and oxygen and all of that. As someone said on one of the Sunday morning shows, a small fraction of a large number is still a large number. And so if even a small fraction of people, if everyone's getting sick, and just a small fraction of those require hospitalization or medical care, our system is pretty much at the brink right now. And if we start pushing more people there, who knows what's going to happen? That's scary.
It's interesting that the places that we're seeing the sort of big impacts, it's New York has reared its head again as a location that sees this explosion. We've seen this sort of conflicted state of affairs out of South Africa that I'm struggling with to make sense of in a country that has a relatively low vaccination rate, unless they were hit so hard with the previous variants and actually have native or natural immunity from people having the disease before in a previous wave. Why then do we not see continued peaks and increase in cases? They've already peaked out. It's a struggle to sort of comprehend it, but I think you're right on all of the counts around. It's incredibly contagious. I don't know what the R naught is certainly above 10. I say it's certainly, I believe it's above 10 and probably higher than that. And it's not having the same significant clinical impact on most people, but as you rightly say, a small percentage of a large number of folks is still going to cause major challenges for the healthcare system. So what are places to do? I mean, it's almost, is there mitigation that we can develop against this, or do we finally say this is you're ending up getting it even if you've been vaccinated, because that's happening too?
Yeah, again, the number, we don't have definitive data. So, and we've gotten in trouble before, right, by talking about things that we thought would happen based on how things have happened in the past with similar viruses. And so, I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is how science works. We're making people are like, oh, you're making guesses. Yep, that's what a hypothesis is. It's a guess, but it's an educated guess based on the data and our experience and history. And so we're guessing here, but it seems to me like we're all going to get this, and that the vast majority of us who are fully vaccinated, and by fully vaccinated I mean three doses of mRNA or one J&J and one dose of mRNA, are going to have mild disease. And by mild disease, and I hope I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but with R naught that high, with so contagious, it's going to be, unless you're in your house and never leave it, it's going to be hard to avoid this thing. Mild disease is still pretty nasty, right? Mild disease could be asymptomatic, but it can also be, feeling like a nasty bug hit you, right? And so, and we would still call that, one of my daughters has a got a kind of a medium grade fever, 101, and headache and a couple episodes of vomiting, and kind of felt like a truck hit her. And I don't know what she has. She's got 3 doses of vaccine. She's also had COVID. And she took a COVID test and it was negative. And does that mean she doesn't have it? Maybe. It might be also that she tested a little too early. So I don't know. As I was trying to explain to her, she felt horrible and wanted her head to kind of explode off her shoulders. I said, this is mild disease. This is it, right? Mild disease, meaning that, hey, you're managing this at home with Tylenol or Motrin and lots of fluids, and you don't need to go to the hospital, and that's great, or urgent care or anywhere else. And so, mild disease is maybe more than a cold. And I think, I'm certainly preparing for that mentally and emotionally. I don't want that, and I'm a full grown man, which means I'm a baby, Dr. Nick. Like I do not deal well with bad headaches and vomiting and muscle aches. I don't want that stuff. But so what do we do? I think we continue to do what we're doing. So everyone should be fully vaccinated. Again, to me, fully vaccinated means that 3rd dose. Everyone should wear a mask when they're out in public. If it were possible, it would be great to test yourself frequently, especially when you're going to be visiting with someone, either going to a large group like a party, or visiting with someone who's immunocompromised in some way, elderly, or they don't have a good functioning immune system. I think it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that at least we knew that we weren't contagious. So before we go and meet with those kinds of folks. So I don't hear any super smart epidemiologists telling us to hunker down and not leave the house. Like, I think that ship has sailed. But at the same time, if I were going to visit family that had an elderly person or immunocompromised person, I would absolutely want everyone to be tested the day of or the day before going and meeting. And of course, I would demand that everyone be fully vaccinated. And I'll say it for the 3rd time: fully vaccinated means 3 doses, in my opinion, of the mRNA or the J&J plus another dose of an mRNA vaccine.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's sobering to hear you talk about the mild disease. I think it's important for people to realize that, because if you haven't had it, avoiding it or trying to mitigate it as much as possible. And that's, as much a function of the vaccine purpose as anything, is to mitigate the impact of the disease, to make it milder, or at least the symptoms milder. The important thing that sort of comes out of this is that, this increases the numbers of folks that are going to be suffering from long COVID. I haven't seen a full sort of data analysis for vaccinated versus unvaccinated and long COVID, but my understanding is both can potentially get it. There may be a difference in the percentages. So we're going to see more of that. And from a mitigation, I think you're absolutely right. I think the travesty of our response has been the lack of available testing, because that's probably one of the best tools to say, I'm going to test myself as close as possible to the time necessary to give you the most relevance of that test, and be it antigen or PCR. The PCRs tend to be too slow, although there is the rapid PCR test that's available. And that's true from a business standpoint. I mean, we've seen a number of conferences have, already flipped. We saw JP Morgan pulled back and said, we're virtual. We see that CES is still going ahead, which is interesting to me because that's only in 3 weeks' time, which feels like right about the time that this is exploding across the country. So I'm wondering how that's going to play out. That's for the new year, and subsequently what happens at this point, it's impossible to predict. But testing, mitigation, using all of those strategies, I think essential going forward. And that applies to businesses and individuals, and protecting the people around you. So 100%. For those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Today I'm talking to Dr. Craig Joseph. He's the Chief Medical Officer at Nordic Consulting Partners, and my monthly episode on news you can use for this past month, December, the last month in 2021. We were just talking about Omicron, which seems to be the prevailing topic du jour, unfortunately. But let's move on. There's been some other pieces of news, not least of all, there was noise about Oracle purchasing Cerner, and then it happened. They bought Cerner. I'm not sure whether I'm surprised. Are you surprised?
I was very surprised. Yes, I was very surprised. And it could be that I'm not aware of some of the merger and acquisition type work that's going on. But I did not see that coming. I'm here to admit it. For those of you who don't know, Cerner is one of the largest electronic health record vendors in the United States and probably around the world. And so a lot of doctors and nurses and physical therapists and dietitians use their software every day to do their jobs, both in the hospital and in the clinics. And the question is really, what will happen now? Will Cerner change? How will it get better? Certainly from their press releases. One thing that Oracle is talking about doing is leveraging their voice recognition technology. That's what I've heard one of their plays is going to be, to say that, hey, now doctors and other clinicians will be able to just talk, and orders will magically happen, and perhaps notes will magically write themselves. And I kind of being a little bit too sarcastic, that is happening today. There are software packages that are attempting to put a note together, a progress note together based on what you and what the doctor and the patient are saying in the room in the clinic. So it's not science fiction. It's actually happening. It's not necessarily ready for prime time, but it's getting there. So I don't know. I'm not sure what benefits besides that one would get from having Oracle own Cerner.
So I have a more basic question around this, and it's really why? What was it that drove Oracle to purchase Cerner? Is this a play into healthcare, a space that they must have, substantial presence because, the underlying databases, tool sets that they've offered, this expands it in some way? Is this access to customers? I'm really curious. That was the piece that really intrigued me, and part of the reason that I didn't have an immediate reaction, because like you, it certainly wasn't something I was thinking about. I guess Cerner has been an acquisition opportunity. It's sort of bounced around a little bit. It struggled as the second tier EMR in some regards, not always and not all around the world, to be clear, but certainly in the US, they seem to have lost a fair amount of ground to the Epic EMR. Why is Oracle interested? Why is Larry Ellison interested?
Well, I don't know. To some extent, it might be that they're interested in the customer base, right? And if you have another way of getting into healthcare, getting into hospital, to be able to visit with the folks who make decisions at the hospital level, that's a benefit. It is very interesting. Microsoft several months ago purchased Nuance, which is a big company that does chiefly voice recognition, so that ability to talk, and now does a lot of the natural language understanding. So it's one thing to record and write down the words. It's a completely different thing to actually know what's being said and being able to leverage that information. That made more sense to me. I got that, why Microsoft would want that presence. But yeah, this will be fun to watch, and I'm most interested not so much in the financial rationale, but like, how will this affect the end users of Cerner? Will they notice a difference? Will things get better? Is there now an infusion of cash, which means potentially an infusion of developers and to improve aspects of the product that people have asked for improvement? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the positive is another player, perhaps with a different perspective, different approach that can bring about, a solid set of competition in the EMR space that is in sore need of innovation, in my view. I think we've struggled in terms of delivering value, in particular to the clinician. It may deliver value in other places, but most of the results of the EMR, in my mind, have not really given clinicians as much of a value in the care of their patients. So perhaps that's what we'll see. I'm hopeful too, but obviously interesting, and we'll continue to watch it and talk about it as more information and perhaps insights emerge. Meantime, other things, I think we've seen a big focus on remote patient monitoring, the shift of the hospital into the home. One of the things that I found intriguing recently was the not contactless, that would be wrong, but the known labs, non-invasive continuous glucose monitor. So we've seen this move from finger sticks, where you just have to puncture your skin, get some blood, test the blood, and some of that was digitized. You could put it into a machine and so forth, but it was painful. I don't know if for anybody that's never had a finger stick for glucose testing, I can tell you it gets painful, not least of all because you have to do it so many times and you end up doing it in the same place and it gets super sensitive. Not fun at all. Along comes the continuous glucose monitors, but that's a big needle. If you've ever seen, go look at the videos for this. It's interesting, and I've done it. I don't know if you've ever tried one. I put one on. It was really insightful. Taught me a lot of things about my habits, when my glucose fell and rose and so forth, particularly around exercise. That was the most interesting for me. And that's better, but it's still a needle in, and it's still, challenging. This is more like a Fitbit style device. I think extraordinary progress, and I think very exciting from a diabetes management, especially for the young, the pediatric age group. I would imagine managing diabetes must have been very, very difficult in the pediatric group.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm a pediatrician. I'm not an endocrinologist, but everything is more difficult. Although I'm not so sure, actually, sometimes some adults I've met recently, I'm not so sure that toddlers have anything on them in terms of being obstinate. But you're absolutely right. Whether you're a child or an adult, poking your finger for at least 4 times a day forever is not a great not a great lifestyle, and the data are not that rich, right? You're only getting 4 numbers, and the ability to have a continuous glucose monitoring system of any sort really is a miracle. We've now kind of come to think of that as a normal everyday thing, but the idea of having essentially a watch on, and that ability for that thing for that wearable to give you numbers that then you can take and translate into instructions as to how you should take your medication. It's great. Right? What else can you say? It's just we're moving in the right direction. And now I think the next thing is the contact lens. Contact lens.
I think all of that's going to expand. So in the closing couple of minutes, 2022, what are you looking forward to? I'll tell you, my optimism is around continued innovation in terms of this, specifically this remote patient monitoring, clinical grade devices that, provide real-time data. And I know lots of my colleagues go, I don't care about the number of steps, I don't this, and it's not about that. It's never a data problem. It's always a filter problem. I think you can present that data. The idea that we measure these things, occasionally when you happen to visit the office. And by the way, my experience, just based on the weighing scales that I use at home every single day, and then go into the office and find that suddenly I've gained X number of pounds, I know that there is not that large of a discrepancy, not least of all a different number of clothes that I'm wearing when I'm in the office, but that contributes for sure. But even the consistency of it provides me insight. It's kept me, I've managed to stabilize my weight, and I think more of that is going to start to deliver exciting innovations. What about you? What are you excited for in 2022?
I'm less worried about innovations. I'm more excited about the potential of not going backwards. And so that would be great if we could continue to just leverage the some of the telehealth tools and opportunities that we've gotten because of this horrible pandemic. Regulations in the U.S. that have been loosened to allow physicians to practice and nurses to practice in different states that they were not fully licensed in, to do telehealth, to do remote patient monitoring. And these things have all been technically okay and easy to do. It's just that no one paid for them. And if no one pays for them, miraculously, they don't seem to happen. And now they're being paid for. And so my hope for next year is that we don't, as the pandemic hopefully starts to peter out and becomes less of a daily presence for us. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but hopefully it will get better. I hope that we don't go backwards and lose some of the progress that we've made in the ability to leverage technology.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a little bit of that, and it's somewhat troubling to see the amount of pullback in some states where now suddenly you've got to have an in-person visit, and they're putting the old style barriers that are all about economics and making restrictions where there should be no restrictions. I think a great thing to continue to focus on and fight for the benefit of the patients. Unfortunately, as usual, we've run out of time. It just remains for me to wish our listeners a very happy and peaceful holiday and a fantastic 2022. And thank you for listening in. And importantly, thanking Craig for joining me each month to talk about the latest and greatest in healthcare. Craig, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the gold bullion that you had been promising me. It hasn't been delivered yet, but I'm sure it's in the mail.
Always in the mail, of course.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at DrNick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.